So Kamala Harris, is she really America's first DEI candidate for president? Or perhaps is it that she is just the most underrated, super badass vice president this side of the millennium? Let's find out together.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been.
All right.
You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Uh-oh.
What we can see, what we believe. Unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened
This goes
by
on.
what has
4 minutes.
Unburdened by what has been. What could be
She really likes this line.
unburdened by what had been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be.
Okay. And then there's this.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
This, by the way, is the debate that destroyed her run for president back in 2020.
Freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Kamala Harris isn't known to be an orator. She's known to have inappropriate cackling or giggling at times where she shouldn't be. She's done nothing of interest as vice president. She's pretty much been off the map. So they don't really have much to focus on with her in a positive light. And so the idea now that, well, she's going to be the first black president for the U.S. has taken hold. Donald Trump, you see, over the last 4 years has made considerable gains among the black community. He's reached a near 20% polling among this voting demographic. And so the panicked Democrat Party is now trying to re-identify Kamala Harris, who is of Indian descent, as black. The Democrat Party and their acolytes in the media, as well as those terminally online individuals across social media, have been making every attempt now to change the narrative. Now, this, of course, set the stage for Donald Trump to take aim at this lie at the National Association of Black Journalists convention. And here is how it went.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
Crowd's laughing at this. They find the joke funny.
Is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty.
Okay. So clearly, Donald Trump is putting gasoline on the fire of all of this. So CNN couldn't let this stand, and they wrote about this unfolding drama with an article titled Fact Check: Trump's lie that Harris all of a sudden embraced a black identity. Let's see what they wrote. So here's the article. Again, fact checked Trump's lie that Harris all of a sudden embraced a black identity. And let's scroll down here. This is the meat of the article. Trump's comments, they write, prompted immediate bipartisan criticism, leaving aside the issue of the appropriateness of the remarks. His claims are just not true. And they write, facts first. Trump claims are false. Harris did not all of a sudden begin identifying as black. She has embraced and discussed her black identity for decades, beginning long before she became a political candidate, while also honoring her South Asian heritage. Did she now? Anyway, the article goes on to write, Harris graduated in 1986 from Howard University, a historically black institution, where she was a member of a historically black sorority. After that, she was elected president of the Association of Black Law Students in her second year at the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. Now, the Political reported back in 2021 that as a third-year student at the law school in 1989, Harris rose to speak against anti-black racism at a campus demonstration prompted by the discovery of racist vandalism. Political reported, quote, for black students, she said, according to the archives of the Hastings Law News, the cartoon was an example of what we deal with all the time. Okay, so is CNN right here? Or are they and their like-minded drones in the mainstream media themselves the perpetuators of a racial lie? Let's find out together, shall we?
Certainly, you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Not good.
Certainly, you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history,
giggle there.
quite an accomplishment.
Not good.
That alone doesn't mean anything, right? Let's go to the next one here. Okay, so this is 2019. This is Kamala Harris on a television show.
Okay, so what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that, but I find that
Oh,
wherever
well.
I go and I see Indian people at the
Thought she was black,
supermarket, on the
though.
street, everyone's like, you know, Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian,
Yes.
but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Okay, thank you.
You do.
I've been telling people
You
we're
do.
related already,
Yeah.
so this is perfect. It's basically true. And so were you raised eating South Indian?
But here's where it gets good. This is CNN. This is an oopsie doopsie. This is a couple of years ago. CNN did an entire segment on Kamala's Indian heritage. Let's watch this together.
My mother, who raised me and my sister, was a proud woman. She was a brown woman. She was a woman with a heavy accent.
And her mother, Shamla Gopalan, was also the biggest influence in Kamala Harris's life.
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
After the big announcement, Harris's sister wrote in a Twitter post, "You can't know who Kamala Harris is without knowing who our mother was." In 1958, a precocious 19-year-old Indian, Gopalan traveled thousands of miles from her home and family to pursue a
So CNN's fact check is being undone by CNN itself. Okay.
doctorate in nutrition and endocrinology in America. She soon became an active civil rights crusader while studying at UC Berkeley.
But once she went there, she almost felt free. And she took part in politics. She used to bring a whole series of literature, leftist literature from Karl Popper. So, he was a great philosopher.
In her book, Harris says, "There is no title or honor on earth I'll treasure more than to say I am Shamla Gopalan Harris's daughter." Harris's visits to India with her mother kept her connected to her roots. Her grandfather, who had strong views on humanitarian issues, worked closely with officials to reallocate refugees. Their conversations had a strong influence on her.
All right. So clearly this is political pandering, but the point is Kamala has always identified as Indian. But now that it's politically expedient, now she wants to be black. This is what Donald Trump is pointing out, and it's blowing up the narrative. Now, honestly, this type of behavior, it reminds me of Hillary Clinton back in 2007 when she was in Selma and she was trying to appeal to the black community. This is just rich. I want you to watch this.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Talk about cringe. But this seems to be something that the Democrat Party engages in time and time again. Hillary Clinton, of course, was a terrible candidate. And we've seen her lose time and time again. But why does the Democrat Party, why do they keep engaging in these kinds of behaviors? I mean, look, I get that the history of the Democrat Party has been entirely race-oriented from their party of slave ownership days. They were the slave party pre-Civil War, leading up to fighting the party of abolition or removal of slavery, the Republican Party, to after the Civil War, being involved with the creation of the KKK, followed by the Jim Crow laws, which was segregation. And yes, they did successfully rebrand the party in the 1960s as the party for the black community, for the little people. But they've just never been able to let it go and do as Martin Luther King Jr. suggested, judge people by the content of their character. Let's watch a classic video from history.
Because I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Now, for whatever reason, the Democrat Party has abandoned this kind of thinking. Instead, there's been a focus of racial division and hatred that just never seems to stop. Their ceaseless focus on race has been a defining attribute of the party. And so, instead of trying to put the focus on what sort of leader Kamala Harris could be, it's just another first focus on race. They've got their first black president with Barack Obama, so now Kamala Harris could be the first African-American president, female. Now, you might be asking, why do they do this? But it's obvious, isn't it? Besides the fact that this is just the standard MO for the Democrat Party, and by that I mean focusing on race and sex first and foremost, they also have the problem of being unable to point to anything positive that Kamala Harris has done in her career. She is despised in her home state of California. And if she hadn't used her sexuality to move up in the world, we wouldn't even know she existed today. And so instead, everything is just race, race, race. It's just so tiresome and exhausting. And the reality is, she couldn't be the party nominee for the Democrats at a worse time. You see, we are living through what feels like the defining moment in modern American history. We as a country are facing the possibility of not just the decline, but potentially the death of our representative republic. This election cycle, as trite as it might sound here, may really be the tipping point for this country. The political system in the US has been crumbling for a while now. Power has been taken from the people and placed into the hands of Washington elites over the last 23 years. Elected officials during this time frame have seen to it that freedoms have been methodically stolen from American citizens at every opportunity. An example of this would be the Patriot Act during the W. Bush years, which saw a massive increase in power for institutions like the FBI, allowing for hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens to be spied upon, leading to just one terror-related conviction, by the way, to show for it. Or let's take the example of the government usurping the student loan program. In 2010, they obliterated the old system, where you had banks doing the loans, and instead turned over the loans to the Department of Education. And what was the end result of this? Student debt soared, doubling since 2010, crippling the young and the naive with debt that they can't get rid of, allowing colleges to charge ever more outrageous prices for education because the government's just giving out so-called free money. It's a trap for the youth. And essentially it wiped out whatever value that most degrees in the US have. And then, of course, who can forget the horrendous COVID pandemic restrictions, which saw U.S. citizens stripped of their rights at every turn possible by the U.S. government. There was the illegal lockdowns, there was the vaccine mandates, and of course, the ever-growing elimination of our vital freedom of speech, with the government working tirelessly to assist big tech platforms in helping them circumvent the law, using this newfound power to wipe out the opinions of citizens who didn't follow the messaging that our dear leaders in Washington so desired. This culminated in the deplatforming, or put it more bluntly, the depersoning or dehumanizing of everyday average citizens and political figures like former President Donald Trump, who was eventually removed from all the platforms, which led to a new form of evil. This kind of growth in power on social media has allowed insidious ideologies to grow unchecked, like the disgusting movement calling themselves MAPS. Now you might be wondering, What in the world is MAPS? Well, wonder no more, my friends. I will elucidate you. MAPS stands for Minor Attracted Persons, or put more accurately, pedophiles. Now, this group of individuals have managed to latch themselves onto the LGBTQ plus barbecue movement. And because of the fear many have of criticizing the LGBTQ group, the MAPS movement has largely received little backlash in their quest to normalize this evil lust for children. And let us not forget a system cracking under the weight of the bastardized voting apparatus, which saw a long and storied history of paper ballots, which made mass voter fraud difficult, replaced by a voting system easily susceptible for hijacking by untrustworthy electronic voter systems, and mass mail-in ballots as well, all of which then make for a tempting target for mass election fraud. Never before has trust in the American system for our elections been so high. I could go on, but you get the point. We live in a dangerous time in American history. The question is then, can this rush towards totalitarian nightmare control be reversed, or are we destined to be ruled by elites behind the scenes in Washington who will stop at nothing to achieve total control over their citizens, not just in their daily lives, but in how they speak and think? This is why movements, by the way, like the LGBT community, added the trans to their squad. Rather than acknowledging the mentally ill who need psychological aid, we instead encouraged the mental decline, culminating in body modifications, permanently destroying the lives of these individuals. And beyond that, and this is perhaps the greater evil here, the war that has been waged to force people to accept this lie, the lie that you can change your biological sex, which, spoiler alert, you cannot. But by doing so, by forcing people, normal people, to go along with the lie publicly, you create an ever-growing cycle of mental illness. People who are forced to publicly live and speak obvious lies that they know it is a lie, under threat, under duress, often experience cognitive dissonance and psychological distress over this. This leads to anxiety, depression, and a sense of powerlessness. It causes fractures in social cohesion of the society at large, as those who accept the lie and speak it are going to be up against those who are resisting the lie, and inevitably it puts them at odds with each other. This then leads to the erosions of freedoms, as the government will, to force the lie, coerce those who are resisting to fall in line, or else it's off to the gulags for these people, the concentration camps, the re-education camps, or what have you, and eventually just putting these people down who simply refuse to fall in line. This is the future that we here in the United States are facing. We have a deep state within our government greedily looking at the American people and seeing a future where all men and women will be slaves to their government masters. They are already well on their way to do this, by the way. These past 4 years, the USA has been ruled, at best, by a man with some kind of dementia or cognitive decline, or at worst, a president that has been nothing more than a puppet for the past 4 years. I'll let you decide which is which. And if not Biden, who? I think it's obvious to say that the laughably incompetent Kamala Harris was not the person behind the scenes running things. So who is it? We don't know. Which then leads me back to the present. When it comes to Kamala Harris, the question that those who might be thinking of voting for her have to ask is, can she overcome her uselessness, her cringe behaviors, and perhaps rise above it all to become the leader of the free world? Because up until now, other than sleeping her way to the top, as well as being a token racial tool for the Biden campaign, she hasn't really had a lot of strengths. The Democrat Party knows how weak Kamala Harris is here, and this is why they chose to just install her rather than letting the people decide, because it would have been chaos. The Democrat Party, because of this, has abandoned their last semblance of normalcy to instead install this woman as their candidate. Now, what price they're going to pay in the long run? Well, only the voters are going to decide. Welcome to the election year 2024. And that, my friends, is going to bring this episode to a close. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you all in the next episode.